I've experienced my own burnout, and I, on reflection, can recognize it was a combination of factors. It wasn't just the job. It was life and the job. And the friction came in because at that point in my life and in my career, I wasn't aligned. And it took me a long time to recognize that, too long in reality. And I think if I had reached out for supervision beyond, I was in the NHS at the time, if I'd reached out for supervision beyond my service, because there was a limit to what they could provide me in that space, and I fully appreciate the bounds of that. But if I had known I could have reached out beyond that and had a conversation with someone to understand where I was at better, I'm not sure I would have been burnt out to the degree I was.
You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Neek. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. Today's podcast conversation explores supervision in occupational therapy with Lynsay McFarlane-Shaw. Lyndsay brings 30 years of pediatric OT experience and has evolved her career to focus on supervision and mentorship. We discuss the differences between supervision practices internationally, particularly contrasting the UK's formal supervision requirements with what we are doing in North America. That's a little bit different. If you've ever wondered about ways to enhance your professional development or support others in theirs, this conversation will give you plenty to think about. Before we get into today's episode, I want to take a quick moment to talk about Jane, the clinic management software and EMR. As an occupational therapist, your main priority should be caring for your clients, not worrying about rising EMR costs. That's why Jane has come up with the new Balance Plan, which includes essential features you need to run your clinic without any of the extra stuff you don't. With the Balance Plan, really helpful features like one-on-one telehealth, email appointment reminders, and unlimited customer support. It's a great fit for new or growing practitioners who are booking up to 20 appointments per month. And the best part is that Jane pays for itself with the cost of just one appointment. So head over to jane.app/pricing to check out their plans, starting at $39 a month in the US and $54 a month in Canada. And if you're ready to get started, don't forget to use the code VITALITY at sign up for a 1-month grace period on your new account. Hi, Lyndsay. Thank you very much for being here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be on your podcast. I've listened to you loads, so it's lovely to be here and having a chat.
Oh, thank you. I never know who's listening, but you are good to comment on things when I post about them. But it is a weird thing to be putting something out into the world that people sometimes quietly enjoy, and you just never know that was the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the beauty of a podcast, though, isn't it? We can enjoy it in so many different spaces. And often I listen in the car. So I'm not
Yeah.
near anywhere to then go back and comment. So it might just be something that comes later in the kind of flow of
Yeah.
someone's social media presence that takes me back to go, oh, yeah, I listened to that and it was amazing.
I think so many OTs listen in the car. Many of us have that mobile aspect to the way we're working, and it's nice to have a little companion to take on those drives through the countryside.
Absolutely. I'm in London, so I don't get the countryside beauty. But yeah, I do love that space to just use that time to be inspired. I love like I've said to you before we started, listening in to other conversations. I have real professional curiosity, so I love to hear what other people are doing and just different ways of being able to be an OT and to celebrate that. So yeah, podcasts are perfect for me in that sense.
I have real professional curiosity. I love that term. That I think that really lends well to your area of passion, because that sense of professional curiosity is the thing we're trying to inspire others toward. So many OTs get caught up in, well, I don't know everything about everything, and that can really undermine our confidence. And essentially, really, it's our curiosity and understanding the way we see the world as being a unique one professionally, and going in with curiosity is where we have a lot of magic.
I actually worry when people feel they do know everything because I think OT is such a kind of multifaceted profession. We're so diverse. We can work in so many different spaces that if you go, yeah, I've got this, I know this, that worries me because no one ever knows. I've been in OT for it'll be 30 years this summer and I'm still learning all the time. And I love that. And I love seeing it done differently. And I love someone challenging my perspective on something because it really gives me a moment to pause and go, okay, am I just thinking that because I've always thought it? Or am I right for the situation I'm in right now?
That's really good. Tell us what you do.
Okay, so I'm Lyndsay. I am an OT supervisor. So, like I just said, I've been an OT for 30 years. I have been really lucky to work with children, young people, and families for all of that time, bar my initial postgraduate kind of basic training as we had it back then, in terms of joining a rotation and doing a bit of physical health, mental health. And I chose that rotation because I had pediatrics on it.
Mhm.
When I got experienced enough to get the pediatric placement, unfortunately, it was removed from the rotation, much to my disappointment. But that led me into learning disabilities, which was really fascinating because it was children and adults. And then I've been with children ever since. So I love working with families. I love working with young people. It really makes OT because no day is the same. And that's part of why I love what we do. But as I come to a new chapter of my career, 30 years in, I suffered a back injury. I just was thinking, Pete's OT, how long can I be on the floor? I decided to look at my other passions really within the profession. And one of the things I've always talked about and always either had good or maybe not always so good things to say about is OT supervision. And that's really where I place myself now. This is the next chapter of my career. And I really want to dedicate that time to really empowering other people to use supervision effectively, to get trained in supervision so they're effective supervisors, and as a profession to value the space that it provides us. Because it often, I don't know what it's like for yourself in Canada and other parts of the world, but in the UK, particularly in busy services, not just statutory, it can happen in independent clinics as well. When time's pressured, it can be something that gets dropped to the side and it can become a little bit of a tick box exercise. And I don't like that. I don't think that's effective. And I don't think it values our profession, but I also don't think it values the person. So the therapist who's there trying to develop, trying to expand their personal and professional skills, their clinical reasoning, that professional curiosity. I think if we do supervision well, we can do all of those things. When we let it get squeezed out, I think we're undervaluing everything, the profession, the service, and the person. So I have a real passion about raising the profile of supervision to be something positive, but to be delivered by skilled and trained therapists. This should be as much a part of our CPD as anything else that we do. And I don't quite feel we're there yet. Certainly not in the UK. I don't know what it's like elsewhere. I'd love to know your experience, Carolyn, of what supervision across your career span has looked like.
Honestly, it's not a term we use as much in North America. And so I think we are doing it. My experience in Canada is that we're engaging in informal ways of connecting and learning and maybe seeking out mentorship or looking to a person on the staff where we work who might be a little bit more senior or who might teach us some things. But to have a formalized sort of supervision process, I don't hear about it much here in Canada. And in fact, sometimes I can hear elements of if you need to be supervised, then you're not an independent clinician, like that we need supervision when we're not yet fully qualified, whether that's being we haven't finished the last step of the exam or we're
Yeah.
still in training. We think about supervision in those stages where it's required. Somebody needs to sign off on your notes, but
Yeah.
it's not a term we're using a lot on an ongoing basis. So here in Canada, where I live to in Alberta, we do need to engage in a process of reflective practice, looking at
Mm.
sort of our core competencies, where there's room for development, and then consider how we would like to go about that development. And so it could be seeking out someone, and I might think of a mentor. Would that be formal or informal? Might it be getting together a group of peers that we meet regularly? Might it be reading a set of articles on a particular topic? Might it be taking a course or reading a book? Or one of the listed options too is teaching a course or writing. Maybe I want to publish something, and that's going to be that next
Yeah.
growth thing. But the formal practice of supervision, I feel, is something that we need to lean into a little bit more here. Can you explain in context? Yeah, could you define supervision?
Oh, that's a great one. I wasn't expecting that question. In the UK, we are expected from a registration point of view, from our Healthcare Professions Council, and from our professional body, the Royal College of OT, that we engage in regular supervision. Now, it's a little bit blurred lines on what regular means, and it definitely alludes to the fact that can vary depending on the stage of your career. But we don't, so it can be fortnightly. So, say a new graduate, straight out of university, fully qualified, but in a new role, totally fish out of water, no idea what's going on. That let's apply all that theory into practice, and they go, oh, yeah, how? That will require a high level of supervision. And that supervision process will definitely involve some teaching, some more formalized or informal teaching, along as well as developing the clinical reasoning. There's a case management element often within organizations where they are looking at ensuring that you are meeting the standards of the service. So, yes, that can feel a bit like monitoring, but also that you have the skills to deliver what you need to for the client that's in front of you. So, it's a bit of that accountability and sense of making sure the quality is there. But supervision can be much more than that. And really, we're looking at across the career span. So, from undergraduate right through until preparing for retirement, we're looking at the individual's both personal skills in terms of how you develop those and those professional sort of CPD learning. So, your reflective practice. How do you put all that learning, whether it's from reading a book, listening to a podcast, doing a journal article, and really analyzing that in depth? How do you take that and actually apply it to your practice? So we have to do all of our CPD. It's different in every country, I'm aware of that, but we have to do all of that. But supervision should be part of the process to help make sure you're applying it to practice. Or it makes you change your practice because you've learned something that perhaps is not best practice. And how does that come back into that clinical space? So traditionally, there's a massive impact on the clinical development. What I'm trying to do is to shed the light on that actually this should be a space to help you develop personally as a clinician and as a person. We all have a life outside of this beautiful world of OT, but also that it helps you think of those professional skills and what's next in your career and what's the right thing for that chapter for you. Because there are times that really we may hit a burnout period. And I know one of my frustrations and worries in the UK, and I'm not sure if it's the same internationally, is we're losing a lot of early career therapists because they're going through university, coming out, it's the job's not quite living up to their expectations, or the demands that they're under are massive. And lots of people are doing that with varying levels of support. So within the first 5 years, we're losing a significant number. And that's a worry for the future of the profession. And I truly believe if we could apply our lens, our OT lens of looking at the person in front of you, looking at what they have to do in their job, looking at the environments they're doing it in, the relationships that they have within all of that, and then what happens in life beyond that, if we could apply that OT process to the supervisor, I think it would be so much more effective. We could really build those connections and relationships within teams, but with our clients, with our services, and really go, this is more than a kind of audit process. This is more than a have you done your notes? Have you seen all your clients? Have you done your hours of X, Y, and Z? This is a who are you? Where are you at? Yes, you need to do those other things, but let's develop you as a person so that you can be the best clinician you can. You can be the best team member you can, but you can do it in a way that feels authentic, it feels aligned with your value. And it's not just, hey, here we are, this is what you've got to do, get on with it. I don't care if you're stressed out. I'm not saying that's what people are doing, but I think there are times in life when we may have all felt a bit like that, where there's been a friction point. So I've experienced my own burnout, and I, on reflection, can recognize it with a combination of factors. It wasn't just the job, it was life and the job. And the friction came in because at that point in my life and in my career, I wasn't aligned. And it took me a long time to recognize that, too long in reality. And I think if I had reached out for supervision beyond, I was in the NHS at the time, if I'd reached out for supervision beyond my service, because there was a limit to what they could provide me in that space, and I fully appreciate the bounds of that. But if I had known I could have reached out beyond that and had a conversation with someone to understand where I was at better, I'm not sure I would have been burnt out to the degree I was. I would have probably still left the job because I recognized that just life and work weren't in the same place at that time, and that's fine. But I would have had help to recognize it. And I think the supervision process can do that if we can do it well, because we all have different stages of our career and we can't always stay in the same place. But one of the things I've learned is I need to listen to myself more, recognize what's happening for me more, and understand it's okay that it's time to change. That took me over 20 years of my career to get my head around. I would like to help people figure that out before they hit the burnout phase. So that's a big part of my passion, I think.
You've articulated that really well. So I'm hearing in there there are elements of your own journey and both needing to shift your own career in this stage of your life and also reflecting on what you needed at an earlier stage in your career. You'd like to make that more available, maybe pass on a few of the lessons you've learned along the way to others, but recognizing there's like this emerging trend of early exodus from the career. And that's tough because, like, within those first 5 years, people often haven't paid off their student loans yet, and it's feeling like a giant investment that hasn't worked out.
And I think, again, that's a difference internationally. So in the UK, our student loans are different to the loans that some of you experience, and ours are less. They're still significant, but they are less. I think the way it works in the UK is that as long as they're working and have a certain income, then that money gets paid back. It gets taken as an extra tax. You don't have to stay in OT to do that. Yes, you want to be in a well enough paid job to be able to pay it back, and OT can provide us with that. But my worry is the bigger worry for the profession if we're investing. So if you think to become an OT, there are other OTs who've invested in your undergraduate career through placement supervision, the teachers and the researchers at the university. But we want people to come out and it's not always going to meet all of your expectations, but if it doesn't, we want to understand why. And we want to help you find a journey that connects with you as a therapist. And that might be, we're so diverse in what we could do as OTs. It might be that someone's just not in the right population that they want to work with. It might also be that people struggle in certain services if it just doesn't match how they like to work, how they learn, how they communicate. And I love that we're stepping further into the diverse kind of nature of OT and beyond statutory services. Now, that's difficult as an early career therapist. I think some are doing it, but then particularly in the UK going, who do I get support from now? Because they do feel isolated. But also just healthcare's changing. So we as OTs, I think, are perfectly suited to be in some of those spaces, whether it's about prevention, whether it's about support, whether it's just using all your amazing OT skills, but in a slightly different way. We have clients who don't want to come into a clinic, who don't want to come into a hospital, but that doesn't mean they don't need to access the skills that we have as OTs. And I think in the UK, because supervision is something we're expected to engage in, we want to know we've got access to supervisors when we step outside of that statutory space as well. And yes, peer supervision and peer mentorship and support is brilliant, but actually having that supervisory relationship where that person is showing up purely for you, that space is yours to use it how you need to use it in that moment. You can't get that in peer support because over time, that doesn't always feel balanced for the other people invested in that. So I think there's something really important at recognizing when we need something more bespoke to us, more person-centered. Um, but in order to do that, you need people with supervision skills that are competent and comfortable. And I know there's lots of OT coaches out there in the more international space that actually are doing a really similar thing to what I'm doing in supervision. And I think that's really important, that whatever it is you access, that if you recognize you need something different and you need a space that can be dedicated to your personal and professional development, that you seek it out and you use it. And I don't know if you, because your kind of setup's maybe a bit more informal, do you feel people are doing that in Canada? That they're seeking out something that's more bespoke to them for different stages of their career?
I think people are choosing continuing education in a way that they're trying to curate their experience. But I don't know that there's a lot of people out there offering supervision. So I do get approached. I am approached from time to time for something like that, but I have a container for that. So my Activate Vitality program is all about supporting OTs in their personal and professional development. And I use the framework of acceptance and commitment therapy to build their psychological flexibility so that they can make these intentional choices and put it in a community so that we can support each other. The niche has evolved to be for OT business owners for a number of practical reasons. It's not necessarily about business. It's more about that the business owners are more likely to invest in that sort of support than the employees. And maybe that just might be a cultural difference.
I don't think that's a cultural difference. I would even say that we have that. I definitely see that in the UK. So I'm an independent practice. I did 20 years in the NHS. For last 10 years, I've had my own independent practice. And then the OT supervision bit has come into this chapter of my career. But the majority of OTs I support are those working in independent practice or diverse settings, because within the statutory services, you do get access to supervision. It is an expectation that you will be provided with that. Now, saying that, I have some NHS OTs that come to me for supervision. And part of that is because of where they are in their careers. Some it's early in their career and they just haven't got access to an experienced pediatric OT that they can talk to. So they've invested in their own development by connecting with me. Other people, it was a career crossroad or a more senior position where they're like, okay, I'm at the top of the tree now. So who do I go to have those conversations? Again, they've chosen to invest. But the majority of people are OT business owners. And the fact that I'm an independent OT and therefore I'm an OT business owner as well. In fact, I love the post you put up recently with the question about, do you see yourself as an entrepreneur when you have your own business? And I have to say, I had seen that 5 years ago. I might have gone, no, but I absolutely do now. So my mindset around that has shifted. And I think there's lots of people out there, like I say, working slightly differently. If you have your own business, you are investing in all of that personal and professional development. If you're employed, certainly here in the UK, and it sounds like the same for you, there's a little bit of an expectation that someone else will pay for, maybe not all of it, but a good chunk of that for you.
Or that it'll be provided within the team or the service, or that the employer will provide opportunities for learning and development.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you say continuing research and education is a big part of what people are doing. I think that happens here in the UK as well, but I don't see, and maybe it's a cultural thing, that we see that as separate from supervision. We definitely see that as part of our development. But we would be discussing within our supervision or mentorship relationships about how that's going to help me get to wherever it is I want to go next in my career. So there's this like ongoing conversation about navigating that career path. And really for me, that's what supervision should be about. It's a collaboration. It's a conversation where you're working together. Sometimes it's helpful just to come and go, oh, I need to say X, Y, and Z. And other times it's really helpful if someone can reflect that back to you with a question that maybe you hadn't thought about. And it just gives then the supervisee a chance to go, I need to ponder on that a bit longer.
So I'm seeing how this is all coming together. I'm in Canada, we are regulated provincially. So each province generally has its own regulatory body, like ARCOT, but it's per province. And here, so I can speak more to our process in Alberta, but I think there is a fair bit of overlap between our different provinces, but very different from what we've seen in the US. And so here we do have this expectation of a reflective process and to then choose our learning opportunities, which could be a choice to seek out supervision or mentorship or training or all the things I listed before. And then we need to write a reflection. We don't have a certain number of hours or a list of courses or anything. I love how organic it is. But the
Yeah.
piece that it sounds like we're missing, which we could choose to do, in that sense of connecting with another to hash that out. Like, it's off. I think I'm due at the end of next month, I think it is. And so it's going to be like, oh, shoot, how do I document everything I've done and make sure I have
Yeah.
goals for that? Right. Like, it's almost a retroactive. Like, I started out
Yeah.
last year with an intention to set some goals, but who knows what was going to come of the year. And so there's this latitude for that to evolve, which I appreciate. But a lot of us aren't thinking to go document it along the way. So we're often doing this retro forward, like looking back and forward at the same time.
Yeah.
But if it's a more intentional, regularly occurring process with another that it externalizes it, discussion, it's getting out of my head and my limited experience of the world and being able to then share with another who maybe has some different experiences that we can compare notes. And I really think that there's a beautiful enrichment. And then contrast that to, here's a list of approved CEU courses. I have to have 10 of them. And that's it. That's a whole other thing that's not what we're doing here, but I see it out there. And it
Yeah.
makes me sad because we're missing these layers of self-awareness and self-reflection and personal growth and expansion and connection and getting feedback that is the thing that makes us grow.
Absolutely. And I think within the UK, we're expected to do formal training, we're expected to do informal training. There's lots of different things that we will be asked to show that we participate in when we have to do our every 2 years, we might be audited in terms of our CPD. Now, supervision is a big part of that. And it is an expectation that we participate in supervision. Like I say, the frequency is the blurry bit, but there is an expectation that we do it. And it is about that reflective practice opportunity. And yes, I'm not saying you can't reflect by just reflecting on what you participated in and looking back over time. I think that's brilliant. And we all need to be doing that. Supervision, I think, takes it a step further because you're sharing that with someone else. It becomes a discussion. It becomes, oh, I might have experienced it in this way. Or have you thought about that from, say, the client's perspective or colleague's perspective, or have you thought about that if how you felt then? Let's review that. 3 months later you come back and go, so do you remember how you felt about it then? How do you feel about it now? How have you learned and grown from that experience? So it's another level to that reflective practice process where someone is just helping you look at it perhaps in a way you hadn't thought to, or challenging you if you're being really hard on yourself. So this is something I see in OTs a lot, is we're quite hard on ourselves as individuals. We think maybe we're not doing enough, we're not working fast enough, whatever it is, or we're not really stepping into our authentic self. We're holding back. And as you well know, there are lots of reasons why that might be the case. But to have someone else point that out and ask you, not and challenge you, but in a supportive environment, a safe environment where supervision must be safe so that you can grow, so you can push those kind of edges and grow. To have somebody else ask you that and challenge you when you're being too hard on yourself, to be more compassionate, to just take a different stance on that, to hear someone validate your knowledge, your experience, your values back to you can be really empowering. And I think that supervising relationship is the crux of effective supervision. If you can connect with someone, if you can collaborate, you can feel safe enough for them to challenge you without feeling threatened. And that's really important. It really enables you to grow. And I have a beautiful supervisor, and she's an Irish OT, and Dr. Onya D, and she is brilliant at doing that for me and stopping me. I'll talk and talk, and she's like, just stop a minute and let's just unpick that.
Yeah.
And if she didn't make me do that, I would just keep talking. So it's really helpful to have someone maybe see the things you don't see.
Yeah.
And to help you look at that from just a different lens, a different perspective. So I think it enriches all of the brilliant CPD and learning that you're doing just in a different way.
Yes.
And I do that in a group setting as well. So you talked about your Activate course. I do offer group supervision to OTs. And obviously I try to make sure they've got common enough themes that they're then going to be able to work together. And that's beautiful to see that community come together and then support each other. So yes, I'm facilitating it, but they're also facilitating for each other as well. And knowing you're not on your own, there's something very powerful in that as well.
Yes, yes. I've had that so many times too, where people show up to the group session and have said, I wasn't sure why I came today. I didn't have a specific thing, but I needed to hear that thing that you just said. And I can so relate, and that they reflect back. And so much beautiful healing that happens from, so often it's our own perception of judgment, or that we've really messed that up. And we're so good at empathetically seeing others' potential. And when you have a
Yeah.
peer who can see, oh no, this is how I see it for you. And now I see my situation differently too, because I can see it in you, but not for
Yeah.
myself. But yeah, the collective is so much more powerful than I could provide
Huge.
individually.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I do, two things I do at the end of my groups every time is I ask my OTs to, for themselves at the end of the discussion, to come up with one thing that they've taken away from the hour that we'd spent together. So it might be something they then they've heard someone else do and they want to take it away and change in their own practice, but also one well-being action. So I think, again, because we're not always good at being compassionate, we're very good at putting other people first and saying yes to things when maybe we should be saying no, that we don't always make enough space for ourselves. And we all carry multiple roles. Lots of people are parents, they're carers, they're volunteers. There's lots of other things that they do. That carving out a little bit of time and making that commitment at the end of the group to do just one well-being action. I'm not asking them to do it every day for the whole month. I'm saying, tell me one thing you're going to do for yourself before we meet again next month. And I find that's been really empowering as well, because I've had one OT who said, I went on holiday for the first time on my own in years and left. And it was only a few days, but she took that time, created that space for herself. And she said, if we hadn't been having these kind of conversations, we wouldn't have thought to do it at this point.
Yeah.
So it's really important that support is not just professional, that it is looking at the whole person, because we bring our whole self through our therapeutic use of self. So we have to be tapping into what's going on for us in that process so that we can be fully present for our colleagues and our clients and ourselves.
Yes. So you are doing supervision and you're teaching supervision.
Yes, I'm doing
meta
both.
supervision. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I decided that I wanted to, in this chapter of my career, I wanted to really take a deep dive and look at supervision, not just reflect on my own experiences and learning, but what I could provide for other people going forward. So I started to look for training, because the training I'd had been within the NHS while I worked there. But to be honest, it was like a couple of hours here and there, probably less than 10 hours over 20 years, if I'm perfectly honest. You learn on the job. There's lots of that. But then you have good supervision, then you have not so good supervision because of what you've experienced and all the other crazy things that go on in busy services. So I thought, I don't want to just do what I've always done. So I started looking at what training was available for supervisors. And actually, within the UK, I found it really difficult to find some bespoke OT training. So I ended up doing a postgrad certificate at the University of Derby in clinical supervision. And it was a multi-professional course. But actually, that was beautiful because it really enriched my thoughts on supervision, based in psychology, but very much about applying it to your own practice. And it was through that I realized not only do I want to empower myself to be a better supervisor, I'd really like to empower other people to upskill on their supervision skills, to see that as a valuable space to spend time and learn in their own CPD time. Because if you're supporting other OTs or other OT students, whatever, and in the UK, our OT assistants are, I hate this term, but unqualified staff. I don't like that as a term, but they're not registered OTs. They're amazing support staff, and a lot of them are very highly skilled. So OTs are supervising them as well. There's a huge range of people you might supervise in your career. We actually need to invest some time in upskilling ourselves to do that effectively. So I decided that alongside doing supervision for people, that I wanted to develop training. Now, it's still in the development space. It's coming soon. I'm hoping spring I will have it ready, and it's going to be online. It's going to be a self-paced training. but with a difference. I'm also going to offer group support so that people can take that theory and come into the group and go, okay, that's all great in theory, Lyndsay, but when I've done this is the response I've got. How can I look at that differently? So essentially a bit of supervision for supervisors, but more that mentorship, more that apply theory into practice, but around that supervision space.
And I'm sure everybody listening can think of an employer or an OT that we had in a practicum that really could have used this training, that really might have hurt our confidence with poorly delivered feedback, or just
Yeah.
unrealistic expectations, or not co-collaborating and just criticizing. Like, I'm sure we've all had those experiences. And I too would like to learn more. I've been an OT 20 some years, 22, I think. And have not taken a student all along because I worked part-time for so long. And then in the
Yeah.
last 5 years, I've worked in such an unusual way that I thought, how could I even have a student? I'm doing so many weird things. And I've had 2 students now in the last year, and it's been very exciting. But I'm
Fabulous.
thinking, gosh, I could learn a little bit about this. I've had lovely students, and I've been very open about, hey, I'm learning too, and please share feedback and we can figure this out together. But yeah, I feel a bit underprepared.
And I think lots of people just can't get access to training. I think that's just
Yeah.
the reality. So if you work in a statutory service or an organization, you might get a couple of hours. But that's it from my experience. And when I've asked on my Facebook group, that's been the feedback that I've had as well. And I just think it's something we need to pay more attention to because, yeah, we've all been on the receiving end of feedback that's perhaps not been delivered as well as it could have been. But as a supervisor, I also see that people are put into supervisory positions when they're not ready, but they don't necessarily have a choice or they don't really have anybody to go, can you help me do this better? I'm struggling. So I just want to make that more accessible for people. And that's partly why I wanted the group element to it, to be able to say, I'm here, I'll do my best to problem solve it with you. I'm not there to tell you what to do because I'm not in your situation. And that's not who I am as a person or a therapist. But I'm there to help you work through it and maybe look at it from a different perspective and to go back. So I'm very much about, I want you to go back with something to try.
Mhm.
So how can we look at that? What could the next step be? Do you feel comfortable doing that and giving it a go? It will very much have that focus because just because I've tried something and it works doesn't mean it'll work for you. It depends on who you're with, the environment that you're in. And we need to make sure that we're personalizing things. But there are strategies we can access in order to do that. And actually, they're not a million miles away from our core OT skills. So actually, we should be brilliant supervisors. What we don't do, in my opinion, is apply that OT process and that OT lens in our supervision process. We're brilliant at doing it for our clients, but we're not so good at doing it for our colleagues. And I would love to see that change. Increasing the opportunity for people to have training in supervision skills is a massive passion for me that builds into my bigger mission of just making supervision more positive, more supportive, more accessible, and to everyone that's working within the OT profession. And it's something that I'm talking to the Royal College of OT about here in the UK, because our kind of position statement on supervision is a little bit old. It's 10 years now. And I'm having conversations and I'd like to be part of the process to refresh that document. And I have other amazing OT supervisors in the UK that are keen to come on board on that journey. So I keep talking to the college and hopefully at some point when it is politically the right time for them, we will get that out there for people. But yeah, part of my mission, I feel like there's this poor, beautiful, lovely OT in the Royal College that I speak to. And every time she gets a message or an email from me, she must think, oh no, it's Lyndsay again. Because I keep banging the drum on the same thing. When are we doing it? Are we ready? Is it time? Yeah, wait a little bit longer.
I can relate to that. I feel like there's a regulatory processes take time to evolve, and we're seeing out in the world, we're seeing evolution happen in real time in response to environmental changes and situational changes and
Yeah.
political changes and funding changes, and that we have to keep
Yeah.
adapting. And regulations don't adapt as quickly by nature, right? And I feel like I was also emailing back and forth with our registrar here in Alberta several years ago as I was evolving my services. And I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't breaking any rules, but there actually weren't rules. And where were we going to find that line? And I just kept signing my emails. What's a trailblazer to do?
Just I think that's really interesting. And I think that's common across different countries. So I
Yeah.
certainly know lots of OTs that are working independently or diverse settings. And when we hit a kind of, oh, are we okay to do that? Or maybe something comes up and there's a question and we think, oh, we better just double check. Sometimes, unfortunately, the Royal College just doesn't have the answer. And it's not because they don't want to, but it's just because sometimes what people are doing is so niche that these things will evolve in time, but it is that it's like research. What comes first, the research idea or the practice? So we've got
Right.
that chicken and egg thing, right? Sometimes it's just a research idea that someone does and it's amazing. Other times it's practice that's been going on for a long time that someone goes, okay, let's put some evidence to that. And I think regulation
More often.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think regulation works a little bit like that as well.
Yeah.
That and it's a slower process because it's generally part of a bigger organization, whereas I'm just
Yeah.
little me here on my own, do my own thing. And if I decide I want to try that, then I just go and try it. I totally understand why it's different in different places, but I'll keep knocking on the door and we'll get there eventually.
And
That is
that's
my
my
plan.
sense too, as if I can demonstrate that I'm questioning boundaries from a responsible and aligning values with the better of the profession, as long as I can
Yeah.
keep showing that if I misstep or misinterpret or interpret differently, I feel like I've communicated and communicated from a place of caring deeply about the profession and wanting to improve it. I'm hopeful there will be some wiggle room.
Yeah, and I think we have probably one of the most diverse professions in healthcare, and therefore there's got to be wiggle room in that. We've got to have pioneers who are willing to go, I'm just going to try this a little bit differently and see how that lands. Because if we take occupation and activity analysis as our footprint, we've got a really wide path that we can travel. So it's how do we do that? And I, like you, completely agree. We need to be respectful. We need to be held accountable for what we do. But we want to promote OT in its widest sense. And it's okay to step outside of the pathway that's already trodden. It's just how do we do that? And who do we have by our side helping us through that journey so you don't feel completely isolated and on your own? And I think that's really important.
Oh, so much. And I know for me, it's not about the what, it's the where. And because I'm reaching people across boundaries, it's if the people I'm helping aren't where I'm registered, that's where the boundaries are being pushed. And then is it
That's hard,
not
yeah.
OT? Yeah. Then it can't be OT, but it is OT, but it's not OT, or isn't it? And but I'm navigating, right? There's an international connectedness that I deeply value, and being able to have conversations like this with you there, or Bronwyn in the UK, or Anya in Ireland, or people in South Africa. I so appreciate all of the places that I get to connect. And I think we are richer for understanding how OT is practiced in other countries. And I think this conversation will really help others who go, oh, wow, that sounds like a very meaningful way of continuing education that's different from where I do it. Maybe I'd like to introduce something like that. And I think these international conversations are important.
I think they're really important. And I do recognize the challenges of working across those boundaries for the reason that I can only supervise, because supervision is a very specific term. I can only supervise other OTs that are HCPC registered like myself. I cannot supervise internationally, but I can teach internationally and I can share and I can talk internationally. For me, my wider mission of promoting supervision, if you call it something else in another country, I don't really care. It's about that connection, that collaboration, that growth, that trusted space to come together.
Yeah.
Call it something else. There'll be someone else who's amazingly skilled who can help you do that in your area. I personally am not reaching beyond that at this stage on a supervision process, but certainly in a training, I think my supervision skills training, I think I'm calling it something around, so it's a bit of a working title, kind of supervision skills, what's in your toolbox, and taking it from basics to brilliance, because there's so much we can do in that space. And you don't have to call it supervision if you're in another country, call it what connects with you. But it's about that upskilling. How do you work with other OTs? How do you help them grow? How do you create a space for them and hold that space for them to work through some of their journey? And I think that's really powerful. So that I want to teach that. I want to talk about that. I talk on social media all the time. And I'm really in this last year really stepped into that supervision space on social media and thought, I'm just going to keep talking about it. And I'm going to see what response I get back. And I'm really loving the collaborations internationally as well as in the UK that I'm having and those conversations, because you're right, as a profession, there's so much we can connect with. There's so much we can learn from each other in different countries, different states on how people do things. But we all come under that one hat of occupational therapy. So let's learn from each other. It's really important.
Are you ready for my last questions? Okay.
Yeah.
What does being brave mean to you?
So I think this is a great question. And because I've listened to your podcast, I've loved the variety of answers. I think for me, it really is about stepping outside of your comfort zone. So being brave enough to connect with what you're thinking and feeling, and really to understand that it's okay to be slightly different from other people or to be very different from other people. There is so much scope within occupational therapy to step into. So really stepping outside of those kind of comfort zones. And I know for me, at times it's taken me a long time to do it, and other times it hasn't. I've just gone, yeah, I'm going. But within that, the other thing for me is recognizing how that feels and recognizing whether that voice of doubt that comes in. So again, we could talk for hours about what that voice of doubt is, but recognizing when that's something genuine or whether it's actually telling you this isn't right now, or this is something you've agreed to, but now your values have shifted, it doesn't align any longer, and take some action to step out of something you're already in. So it's not always about stepping in. Sometimes it's recognizing when to step out. And I think stepping out of something you've committed to takes a lot of bravery to do.
Yes, absolutely it does. It's often easier to take no action and very brave to take action, which could be a big change.
And can be really uncomfortable when you've already committed into something to then go, I don't know why. It's time to take some action and make a change. So brave is about trusting myself.
What is something brave you've done recently?
Oh, I know they're great ones. So for me personally, this last year within my business has been massive in terms of last 2 years. So really investing in that supervision process, upskilling my own skills, but stepping out into the online space and going, I'm here and I'm just going to keep talking about this. And I'm really passionate about it. And I really want people to connect and engage with me in that conversation. That was massive. And I did have support and help to do that, which was great, because I think we all need to be able to tap into that. But also, it was about having the confidence in myself to start reducing my clinical work. So I was 5 days a week on a clinical caseload, to trust and be brave enough to know that this was the right space for me to be in, that I could start reducing my clinical work to give myself the space to really step into the OT supervision space. And I'm glad it's as fulfilling as I hoped it would be. But importantly, from a business point of view, I'm glad I trusted myself to do it, because it also had to make financial sense. It had to be viable as a business. So that was really brave. And my kids and my husband watched me do that and really push myself really into an uncomfortable place in the beginning of that journey. But I'm so glad I did. And my kids are older teens, early 20s. And my son did say to me, wow, Mum, it was really amazing to watch you do that, because I know how much hard work that took to do it and how much kind of stepping into the unknown and that kind of bravery to just take that leap and do it. And it inspired him to really follow up on what he wanted to do. And that was the most beautiful feedback, really, for me to get that from my son.
I can really relate to that too. I have a son who's very interested in entrepreneurship and business, and he started a small business selling hockey cards online. And he took he's in high school. He took an elective course for entrepreneurship, got 100%. and just really has this great questions and curiosity and interest. And I
Yeah,
love to see them growing and shaping in their own way and taking what we put
absolutely.
out and seeing possibility, right?
And in a sense, it gives permission to not just follow the same path that everyone else is following. And I think for young people, that's really hard to do, to be the one that goes, no, I'm not going to go to university, or no, I'm not going to do this. And I really have always parented in a way that I've said to my children, you have to be happy first. Whatever choice you make, it's got to be one that's going to make you happy. There's no point in earning millions of pounds in a job that you hate. Do something you enjoy. So it's giving them permission to step into that space and to know they can do it in a different way from other people.
Wonderful. Well, how can people reach out to you? What would you
So
like people to do after they've listened to this?
So come and follow me on social. So I'm Lynsay McFarlane-Shaw across all my social media. So I spend most of my time in LinkedIn and Instagram, but I am on Facebook as well. And I'm Lynsay McFarlane-Shaw on Facebook, but I have a Facebook group. So anyone who's interested, particularly in supervision and mentorship, my Facebook group is OT Supervision and Mentorship. So come along and join me there in that space. And then obviously there's training coming in the spring. So what I'm going to do is make sure that we have a PDF linked in the show notes. There will be a little bit about supervision skills that you should have in your toolbox. And that, if you're interested in that, then come along and find out more about the training that will be launching later in the springtime.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here and having this enlightening conversation with me.
Oh, it's been fantastic. I'm so grateful to have joined you in this space and to get to come and talk to your wonderful listeners about supervision. And hopefully, it's maybe just made people think about something from a way they haven't looked at it before, particularly because you've got such a beautiful international audience. But I'm really grateful to you for making the space for me to come and join you. It's been a lovely chat.
I agree. What a rich conversation about supervision and professional development in OT. I particularly appreciated Lyndsay's perspective on how supervision can help prevent burnout and support OTs through various career stages and transitions. Whether you call it supervision, mentorship, or professional development, having intentional conversations about our growth as practitioners is so valuable. Thank you for joining us in this discussion, Lyndsay. And if you'd like to connect with Lyndsay, you can find her on social media. I'll put the links in the show notes. And be sure to join her Facebook group, OT Supervision and Mentorship. She even has a free gift for you that's linked in the show notes. Now, if you've been listening for a while, you know that I'm really passionate about supporting OTs through the Activate Vitality program. And I'm excited to announce that I am preparing to have 10 more OTs join our community in March. So if this is something that interests you, if you're looking for community, connection, collaboration, coaching, a place that can feel safe and create a foundation for you to grow as an OT business owner, I'd love to talk to you. I'll put the details about how to do so in the show notes, and I can't wait to see who joins me in this next cohort of the Activate Vitality program. Thanks for listening, and as always, be brave, OTs.